What if I told you that the most well-known story of the people of Israel could have been completely different? Imagine Moses not only freeing the people from Egypt, but also setting foot on Canaanite soil, conquering Jericho alongside Joshua, and establishing the first laws in Jerusalem. A single different decision in the desert would have changed not just the life of one man, but the destiny of an entire nation. Today, you will discover what this alternate history would look like, changing everything we know about the conquest of the Promised Land. Before we begin this fascinating journey, I want to extend a special invitation to you. If you, like me, have ever wondered about the what-ifs of the Bible, if you've ever imagined how certain stories might have taken different turns, you're in the right place. Leave a like down below, because it helps me know that you enjoy this type of reflective content, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our alternative biblical studies. Now let's dive into this story that could have been... To understand our alternate history, we first need to remember what actually happened. Moses, after 40 years in the desert, arrived at Mount Nebo in the land of Moab. There, God showed him the entire Promised Land, from Dan to Beersheba, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. It was a majestic view, a promise finally within sight. But then came the divine sentence. This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it. The reason? That moment of disobedience at Meribah, when Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it, showing a lack of trust before the people. Moses died there, on Mount Nebo, at 120 years old, with his eyes still bright and his vigor intact. Joshua took over the leadership and led the people across the Jordan. But what if at that crucial moment in Meribah, Moses had done things differently? Let's go back to that day at Meribah Kadesh. The people were thirsty, grumbling against Moses and Aaron, questioning why they were brought out of Egypt. The pressure was immense. But imagine if, at that moment, Moses had taken a deep breath, controlled his frustration, and instead of being carried away by emotion, had obeyed God's word exactly. He takes the staff, gathers the people before the rock, and with a firm but controlled voice declares, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock? No, it is the Lord who will do this." And then, instead of striking the rock, he speaks to it, just as God had commanded. Water gushes out abundantly. The people drink, are satisfied, and something in the air changes. This time, there was no disobedience. This time, Moses honored God before all the people. This time, God's holiness was publicly acknowledged. The years pass, and we arrive at the crucial moment. Moses is on Mount Nebo, but this time the conversation with God is different. "Moses, my faithful servant, you have honored my name before the children of Israel. You have sanctified me before them. Go down, cross the Jordan, and take possession of the land I promised to your fathers." Imagine Moses' emotion. At 120 years old, still vigorous, he descends the mountain not to die, but to complete his life's mission. The people rejoice to see their leader return. Joshua, already designated as his successor, now becomes Moses' right-hand man in the conquest. The Jordan River is at flood stage. It is the time of the harvest, but now both Moses and Joshua are present. Moses with his experience from the Red Sea, and Joshua with his unwavering faith lead the people. When the priest's feet touch the water, the Jordan parts, but this time there is something different in the air, a dual authority, a complementary leadership. The people cross on dry ground, and when they reach the other side, Moses raises his hands and prays, "Lord, as you parted the Red Sea to bring us out of Egypt, you have parted the Jordan to bring us into the Promised Land. From slaves to heirs, from pilgrims to possessors, blessed be your name forever," the conquest of Jericho. We then arrive at the most iconic moment, the conquest of Jericho. But now it is Moses who receives the vision of the angel of the Lord. The very liberator of Egypt stands before the impassable walls of Jericho. The strategy is the same: march around the city for 7 days, but the execution has a different power. When Moses, the man who spoke with God face to face, marches at the head of the people with the Ark of the Covenant, there is an authority that transcends the ordinary. On the 7th day, when he raises his staff, the same one that became a serpent before Pharaoh, that parted the Red Sea, that brought forth water from the rock, and shouts, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The walls don't just fall, they are completely pulverized. The establishment of the laws. After the conquest of Jericho, something unique happens. Moses, who received the law at Sinai, now has the opportunity to personally establish the judicial system in the Promised Land. He doesn't just hand the laws over to Joshua, he implements them directly. In Shechem, between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, Moses personally conducts the covenant renewal ceremony. His voice echoes through the valleys as he proclaims, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." But this time, he isn't just passing the baton, he is laying the foundation of the nation he will help govern. The Moses-Joshua partnership. One of the most interesting consequences of this alternate history is the partnership between Moses and Joshua. Moses, with his experience and intimate relationship with God, becomes the spiritual and legislative leader. Joshua, with his military and strategic skill, takes the lead in the conquests. Together, they develop a more efficient conquest strategy. While Joshua plans the battles, Moses intercedes and prophesies. When they face the giants of Hebron, it is Moses who declares, "Do not be afraid of them. The Lord himself will fight for you." And his word carries the weight of decades of experience with the supernatural. The conquest of the city-states. City after city falls before this dual leadership. Ai, Hebron, Lachish, Debir, each victory is preceded by Moses' prayers and executed by Joshua's strategy. When the 5 Amorite kings ally against Gibeon, it is Moses who prays for the sun to stand still and Joshua who commands the battle. What is most impressive is that with Moses present, many battles don't even need to be fought. Entire kings surrender when they hear that the man who defeated Pharaoh is marching against them. Moses' reputation precedes the Israelite army, the establishment of the tabernacle in Jerusalem. One of the most significant decisions in this alternate history occurs when Moses decides to establish the tabernacle in Jerusalem. He recognizes that this city, situated in the geographical center of the land, is the place God has chosen for his dwelling. Unlike the real story, where the tabernacle remained in Shiloh for a long time, in this version, Moses personally oversees the construction of the first permanent center of worship in Jerusalem. He organizes the Levites, establishes the priestly divisions, and institutes the annual festivals. The division of the land. When the time comes to divide the land among the tribes, Moses doesn't just instruct Joshua on how to do it. He actively participates in the process. Using the Urim and Thummim, he personally consults God about each tribe's inheritance. There is something poetic in seeing Moses, who knew every family during 40 years in the desert, now personally distributing the inheritances in the Promised Land. He knows the needs of each tribe, remembers the promises made to each family, and divides the land not just geographically, but with the heart of a shepherd, the last years of Moses. In this alternate history, Moses lives to be 150 years old, witnessing not only the conquest, but also the initial establishment of the Kingdom of Israel. He sees the first harvests, the first festivals celebrated on Canaanite soil, the first births of a truly Israelite generation. His final years are dedicated to teaching. Every morning he sits at the entrance of the tabernacle in Jerusalem and teaches the law to the people. Children born in the Promised Land grow up hearing directly from the great lawgiver the stories of Egypt, the desert, and the miracles of God. The death of Moses in the Promised Land. When his time finally comes, Moses does not die alone on Mount Nebo. He dies in Jerusalem, surrounded by the people he loved, in the land he helped conquer. His last words are not of longing for the promised land, but of gratitude for having lived to see it fully established. Joshua, now also old, takes full leadership, but with a solid foundation established by Moses himself. The transition is smooth because it was made gradually, with Moses personally preparing every aspect of governance. This alternate history teaches us profound lessons about obedience, consequences, and the grace of God. Although it is speculation, it makes us reflect on important spiritual truths. First, we see the power of obedience. A single moment of disobedience cost Moses entry into the Promised Land. This reminds us that our choices have lasting consequences. God does not change his words to fit our emotions or circumstances. Second, we realize that God can use even our failures for his purposes. In the real story, Moses' death on Mount Nebo served to show that not even the greatest leaders are above God's law. Joshua had to learn to depend directly on God, not on the shadow of Moses. Third, this reflection teaches us about the importance of sanctifying God's name. Moses was prevented from entering the Promised Land not for just any sin, but for failing to sanctify God's name before the people. This shows us that those in leadership positions have an even greater responsibility to honor God. Fourth, we see that God's plans are perfect, even when we don't understand them. The real story, with Joshua taking sole leadership, demonstrated that the new generation needed a new type of leader. Moses represented the past, the desert, the journey. Joshua represented the future, the conquest, the possession. Finally, this reflection invites us to think about our own rocks at Meribah. What are the moments in our lives where our obedience is tested? How do we react when we are under pressure? Can we honor God even when circumstances are adverse? The truth is that we all have our Meribah moments. The difference lies in how we respond to them. Moses, even having failed at that moment, continued to be used by God until the end of his life. His failure did not nullify his calling, but it had consequences. This alternate history reminds us that our choices matter, that obedience has rewards, and that God is both just and merciful. Although Moses did not enter the Promised Land physically, he saw it spiritually, and his work continued through Joshua. And you, what promised land does God have for your life? What promises has he made that have not yet been fulfilled? Is there a rock at Meribah that you need to handle with obedience instead of frustration? If this video made you reflect on the importance of obedience and the consequences of our choices, leave a like down below. Share it with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness, even in the midst of our failures. And tell me in the comments, what was the most important lesson you learned from this alternate history? What moment in Moses' life inspires you the most? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss our next biblical studies. Next week, we'll explore another fascinating story. What if David hadn't committed adultery with Bathsheba? You won't want to miss it. May God bless your life and give you the wisdom to make the right decisions in your Meribah moments. Until the next video, and remember, your choices today determine your blessings tomorrow. Final word, just as Moses saw the promised land from Mount Nebo, sometimes God allows us to see his promises before we possess them. The question is not whether we will see them, but whether we will obey him in the process of conquering them.